Hey, what's up? This is Mark at alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today, we're going to continue building our simple Phoenix LiveView app. If you're new to the site or to the series, go to alchemist.camp/episodes, scroll down to Simple Phoenix LiveView App Setup, and get started there. For everyone else, we just finished scaffolding out the users and setting up all the database schemas for the users and podcasts and content for our site. So today we're going to change the users from traditional templates and views to Phoenix LiveView. So instead of traditional page loads for all of our users, we'll be doing everything over Phoenix channels, and it'll be very snappy. I've got a new extension, by the way, VS Code. It's called 1984. Comes with a bunch of different color themes that are pretty fun. I like the cyberpunk one and the unbolded one, so that's why the editor looks so different. Anyway, there are a couple things we need to change in the app just getting started. One is in the user schema, I made website required, so everyone who creates an account so they can comment on the podcasts has to have a website. I'm going to change that because I don't think most commenters do have a website, but maybe they do and they want to share the link to it, as is common on blogs and such. And the other thing is I've got a unique constraint in the user schema, but that's not being enforced in the database right now. So I'm going to go to the create users migration and add that. So instead of just creating an index for email, we'll make it a unique index. And now that will be enforced by the database. Now, normally when this kind of change is made, we would make a new migration, and that new migration would remove the existing index and add a unique index. However, since we're still in the process of building this app, it's nicer to just drop the whole database and rebuild it, so that when we're done, we have, all of our user-related things in one schema in one module, instead of having several migrations. The first one, creating the users, the next one adding, a few things here and there, and then the next one adding even more. It's just kind of messy. So that's why we're editing this file. We will have to drop and rebuild the database, and doing that, we'll lose the example user I created. There's a seeds.exs file under the repo directory that is basically made just for this kind of situation. Whenever the database is set up, everything in this file will be executed. So you can see from the comment, you can just use Reactor, or whatever the name of your app is, .repo.insert, in order to insert that data into the database. We can also use the functions in the context that we built last time. So that's what we're going to do. We'll alias reactor.accounts, since that's a context where users are. Then we'll use accounts.createUser and give it the data of the user we want. So the first user was me. That'll be email of alchemist.camp@gmail.com and name of Mark, website of https alchemist.camp. Save that, and while we're here, we might as well make another dummy user, and that one will just be a totally fake user. We'll call sam@example.com, name Sam, and Sam is actually not going to have a website. So we'll save it like so. And now we can do mix ecto.drop to drop our entire database, mix ecto setup to create the database, run the migrations, and run the seeds file. And we should see 2 users inserted. Now we can run mix phoenix.server to start our server. And there's a link to it. We'll go to the users directory, and we see 2 users created. But I misspelled Sam. No problem. I'll just go here and remove the E, and we can rerun the last 3 commands, and we'll have the database newly set up with the correct user. With that in place, we'll close this and go to our accounts context. And we're going to add a few things we need for communicating with LiveView. The first is a channel topic, and we're just going to inspect the module itself and then use that name as a topic. So in this case, it would be just accounts, the string accounts. And if we change the name of the module, this will get updated with it, so we don't have to change it in multiple places. And we'll have two versions of a subscribe function. The first is without any arguments. This one is for subscribing to the list of all users. And we use phoenix.pubsub.subscribe. And we're subscribing to reactor.pubsub. So the PubSub module for our own application, and then the name of the topic, which in this case is accounts. And then we'll copy this this function definition, and in this version we'll pass the user ID in, and then we'll subscribe to the topic concatenated with the user's ID. So that'll be pound user ID, close pound. And so this one will be used for when we show a user or edit a user, and this one will be used for the index page. Next, we'll need to notify the subscribers when something changes. So nothing changes in list users. This is just getting information. Same thing with get user. But in create user, we've changed what's in the listing of users. There's one more than there used to be. So we'll call a new function, which we haven't created yet, called notify subscribers. And then we're passing in this user, which was just created, since that's going to be the first argument passed into anything in the pipeline. Then user and created. So this list of couple of atoms is just the module or the schema and the action. So we notify everyone that a user has been created, and we'll do the same thing in update, except of course it's not going to be created, it's going to be updated. And we'll use the same thing in delete user again, except of course it's not updated anymore, it's deleted. Then at the bottom of our module, we'll create two versions of this notify subscribers function. The simpler one is the case where there's an error. So if there's an error, notify subscribers matching on a tuple that has an error. Keep in mind, when we try to create a user or update a user, Ecto will send back a tuple like this with an error if there's a problem and a reason for the error. And then what we'll do is we'll just pass that on in the pipeline, because we really need this function, this notify subscribers, to be transparent from the point of view from the pipeline where it is. Reason, and then we'll make another version of it, which will be a bit more complicated for the happy path. And that's still called notify subscribers. And it's going to have an OK tuple and a result. And it's also going to have an event. And that's going to be the event like user created or user updated. And we'll use phoenix.pubsub to send out the broadcast to everyone who subscribed. So broadcast reactor.pubsub and the topic. And we're also going to pass along the module that we're working with and the event and the result. Let me close this sidebar there so we can see everything. So that will notify anyone who subscribed to the list. And if we want to notify everyone who's subscribed to the individual user in question, then it's almost the same again, except instead of just topic, it's topic plus the user's ID. And we don't see an obvious place here where we have the user ID. Fortunately, this result is the user that was just generated from the database, or the listing. But if it's a listing, they're not going to be subscribed to the individual topic here. So the result has an ID, just like it has a name and an email and all the other fields a user has. So we'll just use result.id here. And then still pass along the module, the event, and the result. All right, next up is we're going to make a new directory for our live views. So we have this live directory and foo live. In fact, that's still working here. If we were to go to foo, you'll see whatever key press we enter is shown on the screen. In this live directory, we've got a single module for foo live. Users are going to be more complicated though, because we're going to have basically, we're going to have a separate file for each action. We'll have a new, we'll have an update, we'll have an edit, we'll also have a show and a form for the edit and for the new. So we're going to make a separate directory for users. It'll be called user_live, and under user_live, we'll have all of our live views for users. So we'll just start with one called index.ex. Before we build it out though, let's make the route for it in our router. So we've got resources for comments, podcasts, and users. We can use the new macro live and make a route for users. And this is not getting everything related to users like resources does. It's just the /users route for the index. So user live.index. And in our user view, we'll have to alias the new directory. So do alias reactor web.userlive. Now, since this live route is listed higher than resources, if we go to users, we should just get nothing. Yeah, so it doesn't exist. So we'll need to create our live view, and then we'll need to change our index.html.eex to a .leex and make a few changes. We'll go back to that index module and finish or start creating it. And it's called reactor web.userlive.index, just as you would guess from its path. And we need to use Phoenix LiveView since it is a live view. And we'll also alias reactor.accounts just so that we have access to all the account functions such as getting the index and doing the subscriptions. And alias reactor web.userView because that's the where the template we're going to render is. And just like any live view, we're going to need a mount and a render function. Our render function is really simple, just render assigns. So we're passing in whatever assigns that we got, and we'll render it with userView.render, and the name of the module is index.html, and pass the assigns. So we'll go to the user index HTML. Yep, there we go. And we need to change this from index.html.eex to index.html.leex since it's going to be live. And another effect of that is that these links need to be changed to live_link. And I'll just repeat that for each of these. The user path is going to change to live path. And again, I'll just repeat that for, actually delete is going to be special, so I'm not going to do that for delete. Now this path is not going to have access to a con anymore, it's going to have a socket. And this will gracefully degrade, but if you're making a live template, you have to do it this way. And instead of show being an atom like this, it's going to be user live.show, which doesn't exist yet. And same thing for edit. So user live.edit. And delete, as I said, was special. Delete is going to be a link to just a hash because it's not going anywhere. It's just going to send the delete command over the channels. So delete to the comma there and just make this a hash. And we actually don't need any of the rest of this line, so I'll delete it and add a Phoenix click. This is something built into LiveView, Phoenix click, and we give it the name of an action. We'll delete user, So whenever anyone clicks on this delete link, it will send a delete user action, and the value sent with that click will be Phoenix underscore value underscore ID. So that means we'll send an ID will be the key, and then the value of that key will be user.id. And that should set it up for delete. Do we have any other non-live links? We do. So we'll change this to live underscore link. And once again, instead of the routes.user path, we'll change this to live path. And instead of a con, we'll change this to a socket. And instead of new, it's going to be user live.new. Okay, with each of those changed, I think we're good to go back to the user index, user live index. So the render is that index HTML we just worked on. Then we're going to have a mount function, and since this one's a little bit more complicated, we'll make a helper for it as well for fetching. So session, which we're not going to do anything with. By the way, if you're not on Phoenix LiveView version 0.5.1, like this tutorial is at the moment, you'll need a third parameter there. My advice is follow the same versions I'm using. I will be upgrading to 0.7.1 very soon. If connected socket, then we'll call reactor.accounts.subscribe. Then we need a socket, but we need to fetch some information for it. We're going to make a helper fetch function down below immediately after this one that will add some more things to the socket assigns. Basically add the users we need. So actually make that a private function fetch, and this function is going to get the users just like we would do in a user controller. Let's take a look at user controller. So you see under index, we get the users with accounts.listUsers, then we render. It's going to be very similar here. We'll actually get the same users from account list users, and then we'll assign it to the socket instead of the rendering a con like you would do in a traditional controller. So socket and users are now users, which we just got above. And one thing that's special to LiveView is we can set the page title. The reason for that is because you can navigate between pages without doing a full web page reload. So it's just nice to have a helper to set the page title, and there is one. It's called page title, and we'll set that to listing users. Then we'll make handle info. And this will handle the accounts and user and whatever other information is sent along with the socket, and we'll no reply and fetch socket. Then finally, we'll want to set up a handle event to go along with that delete user that we're sending from the Phoenix click in the template. So handle event, and the event name is delete user, and it's always sending an ID, and that ID will be a user ID and a socket as well. And what we'll do with that ID is we'll get the user, then we need to use that ID to get the user struct so that we can delete it. So accounts.getUser user ID, and we'll fetch that user that we just got into accounts.deleteUser to delete it, and then we'll send no reply and the socket. And do we need to call fetch? Well, no, we don't really, because when the user is deleted, the context accounts will notify subscribers that the user's been deleted. We get this we get the notification, and we refetch the users. So this should be all we need. Getting some errors here because there is nothing for show or anything except for index in the router, so we can add that. We've got live users, so we'll make a users/ID that will go to user live show. And as long as we're here, we'll also do an edit. And that's going to go to user live edit. And we'll do a new as well, which will be users/new and user live new. And now we see everything. If we hover over a show, it just says users1. Unfortunately, that's going to get captured by our live show instead of by this resources show. In fact, this resources is already, it's unreachable. Nothing in there will ever be captured. So we'll go back to the index, and now let's create a view for new.